Good morning, Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Nxasana.
Morning, Chair.
Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Morning, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, the witness to be called today is Mr. Mxolisi Nxasana, called at your direction and not as part of the work streams that have been presenting evidence before you. Tomorrow, the aviation work stream will begin its work for the next few weeks. We obtained the statement finally in its signed form, attested form, last night, as at yesterday, it was not clear who would be implicated, but Rule 3.3 notices will be issued at the conclusion of the evidence. Can I hand up Exhibit EE1?
Well, yes, you may. Normally, Rule 3.3 notices are issued before. If you propose to have them issued after, we should explain to the public why.
Yes. Chair, the direction from the Chair was that a series of witnesses be called. Those witnesses fall outside the normal planning of the legal team and the investigation team. It was only late last week that it was planned, therefore, for Mr. Nxasana, in the absence of other witnesses who were unavailable, to come today. The time was set aside for consultation on Monday, the investigators having done quite some preparation over the weekend. Mr. Nxasana was not available on Monday and therefore had to come from Durban to Johannesburg yesterday, when his statement and evidence was prepared in consultation with the legal team, myself. It was not clear until yesterday evening, when the statement was finally attested to, who would be implicated and to what extent. It was not possible to obtain from the various judgments and court records read over the weekend with any certainty who should be implicated. And for that reason, and because this witness falls into a different category from those that are planned from the outset, we would ask your leave to issue 3.3s after the conclusion of the evidence today.
Well, doesn't his evidence really relate to matters that have already been dealt with in courts and judgments of the High Court and the Constitutional Court, where those who may be implicated have been aware of what he says about his tenure at the NPA, and they have had a chance to respond to those? Does it cover anything new?
Yes, it does. The statement does, Chair. The focus is not entirely on the litigation that has gone through the courts concerning the circumstances under which the contract of Mr. Nxasana came to an end, and what the courts have said about it, and the various other applications that have come before court, including the Constitutional Court, in relation to the termination of their services. The evidence of Mr. Nxasana deals with a much broader set of issues, and it was only on full examination of those issues that the extent and the basis upon which implicated persons are indeed implicated can properly be dealt with. So there are different issues. The various court cases are a matter of record, and I will in due course ask leave to place on record publicly excerpts from the judgment of the Constitutional Court in relation to the matter that finally came before court, where the Constitutional Court's attitude to the independence of the NPA and matters related to the independence are set out. But apart from that, those particular issues that led to that litigation in the courts are not central to the statement. He deals with other matters in addition.
Well, as you say, he was among a number of witnesses that I said should be called. Other witnesses were witnesses who have been implicated by certain witnesses, and other witnesses were not necessarily implicated, but would need to come before the commission to give their version, which could corroborate or not corroborate previous witnesses. And he falls under law enforcement, but I had considered that his evidence, he needs to give evidence. But I considered that what was important relates to, in regard to his evidence, relates to his tenure at the NPA, certain matters which have been in the public domain, as far as I'm concerned. Those are the matters I had in mind, and particularly how he left the NPA. Now that has been dealt with extensively in affidavits that were filed by him and by the former president and other persons in the High Court, and in the matter that culminated in the Constitutional Court. I think it was brought by Corruption Watch and maybe other parties. But there may be other matters that the legal team, had, also thought of once he was to be called. So I would like the full set of affidavits in the Corruption Watch matter to be placed before me as soon as possible to give me a full picture of the situation. So obviously you can cover whatever the legal team or you think should be covered in relation to his evidence. But in particular, I was interested in his tenure at the NPA, some of the matters that may be important for the Commission in the light of its terms of reference. There have been all kinds of allegations and evidence about the NPA, and then of course the circumstances under which he vacated office.
Yes.
So I thought I would just make clear what I had in mind, but from the legal team's point of view, you are at large to cover much more than that if you believe he has got more evidence that relates to matters falling under our terms of reference.
Chair, the investigators have done an enormous amount of work
Yes.
in the time
Yes.
from the day in which it was decided that Mr. Nxasana should be requested to give evidence.
Yes.
The documents to which you've referred, particularly the court documents, have been collated.
Yes.
We do have them here and
Yes.
are able to put them before you.
Yes.
It was, however, necessary to leave the public domain to one side and concentrate on the allegations relevant both in the court applications and other matters relevant as the evidence of the Commission has been put before you.
Yes.
In order to get the detail
Yes.
of exactly what allegations he makes and
Yes.
who should be
Yes.
served with notices in regard to the detail that you will hear.
Yes. No, that's fine. Thank
Of
you.
particular concern to the legal team are the questions as to the independence and effectiveness of the National Prosecuting Authority. And the question will be raised as to what extent, if any, there has been political interference in senior appointments in the National Prosecuting Authority and the effect this has had on the efficacy of the organization. And this is a matter addressed pertinently by Justice Madlanga in the Constitutional Court judgment. And I will ask leave to put excerpts on record in due course at the conclusion of the evidence.
Yes, well, I think you should put in the whole judgment and draw particular attention to particular
Yes.
parts of the judgment that you think are particularly important.
That judgment is in your bundle after the
Yes.
divider at page 85 and following.
Okay, no, that's fine.
It's a very
Yes.
instructive judgment in
Yes.
regard to the issues that the Commission is dealing
Yes.
with.
No, that's fine. Indeed, of course, the main point of Mr. Nxasana's evidence has to be about the independence of the NPA and whether there has been interference with it and by whom and in what circumstances would that interference be justified? Is it permissible? Is it not permissible? So more than anything, that's the most important thing. Everything else is about that. You know, all the evidence has to revolve around that, whether there was interference, and if so, what form it took and under what circumstances.
Yes. And not only Mr. Nxasana, but other witnesses will deal with
Yes.
those questions
Yes,
and
yes.
their answers
Yes.
in due course.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Chair, bundle EE1 is out of sequence because the bundles for the aviation tranche of evidence have already been prepared as bundle
Yes.
DD.
Yes.
So this is a little out of sequence, but I think the circumstances left us with no choice.
Yes, okay.
May the witness be sworn,
Thank you.
or may he
Please swear him in.
give the
or
affirmation.
Administer the affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Mxolisi Nxasana.
Do you have any objection with making the prescribed affirmation?
No, I have none.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "I truly affirm."
I truly affirm.
Thank you.
Mr. Nxasana, would you bring the microphone closer to you, please? You have in front of you a bundle marked EE1. Do you see that? It's exhibit EE1.
Yes, I have.
Would you go to page 27, please?
Yes, I am on page 27.
Whose signature is that at the bottom of page 27?
Yes, I confirm that.
Is that your signature?
Yes, it is my signature.
Did you attest to this affidavit last night?
Yes, I did.
And the statement from page 1 to 28, are you satisfied that that correctly reflects the contents of the evidence that you're going to give and wish to give?
Yes, Chair, I do confirm that this is my statement.
And subject to any typographical errors or other errors we may come across, of which we don't yet know, the contents are true and correct.
The contents are true and correct, I confirm.
Mr. Pretorius, before you proceed, I noticed that the witness did an affirmation now, but the statement is. I noticed.
Sorry, Chair.
I noticed that the witness affirmed a few minutes ago, but the affidavit is an affidavit and it's under oath. Is everything in order with that?
I noticed that now. Chair, this morning I asked the witness, Mr. Nxasana, which course of action he'd like to take today. My attention was not drawn to the fact that this was an oath, nor did I pay any attention to it, quite honestly, Chair. But perhaps the witness might explain.
We can ask Mr. Nxasana.
Chair, thank
yes.
you. Chair, it is an option that was open to me. I was asked a question. Then I opted for an affirmation, but I don't have a problem giving evidence under oath. In
Sorry.
line.
Either is fine. This you did as an oath, and it's fine. And now you did an affirmation. Both are fine. I just want to check that.
Yes, it's fine.
They are both fine.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Nxasana, it's common knowledge that you are a former National Director of Public Prosecutions,
That is correct.
and in that capacity you carried out the duties of your office in Pretoria.
That is correct, Chair.
Before we deal with the period of your own office, and before we deal with the brief history of the NPA, at least to your knowledge, before you came to the NPA, please tell the Chair what your qualifications are and what profession you're performing at the moment.
Chair, I hold a BProc degree and an LLB degree, both degrees which I obtained from the University of Zululand. I served articles of clerkship and I was admitted as an attorney in 1997. And from that date of my admission, I practiced for my own account until 2013 when I was appointed as the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
You left the National Director of Public Prosecutions post in May 2015, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
And since then, what work have you been performing, if any?
I have gone back to set up my practice again, and I'm practicing in Durban for my own account as the attorney.
So you're an attorney in private practice at
That is correct, Chair.
All right. In Section A of your statement at page 1, you have given a brief timeline in order to illustrate a point that is pertinent to the work of the Commission. You set out in paragraph 3 a timeline, and in that timeline you note who has been the National Director of Public Prosecutions for what period since April 2001. Would you place that on record, please?
Thank you, Chair. To the best of my recollection, Chair, Mr. Bulelan Ngoga was the first National Director of Public Prosecutions, I think from April 2001 until 31 August 2004. And Dr. Silas Ramaid, in an acting position, was the National Director of Public Prosecution from August 2004 to January 2005. Then on 1st of February 2005 to 17 February 2009, Advocate Vus Pikoli was the National Director of Public Prosecutions. After him, Advocate Mkoteti Mishe, in an acting capacity, was also appointed as the National Director of Public Prosecution from the 1st of May 2009 until 31 October 2009. After him, on 1st December 2009 until 8 May 2012, Advocate Menzies Melane was the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Then on 20 December 2011 until 30 September 2013, Advocate Nomgcobo Chiba was appointed to act as the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Then on the 1st of October 2013, I took up the position until the 31st of May 2015. I was the National Director of Public Prosecutions. I was succeeded by Advocate Sean Abrams on the 18th of June 2015 until 13 August 2018. On the 1st of August 2018 to 31 January 2019, Dr. Silas Ramaita again was appointed to act in that capacity. Then from the 1st of February 2019 to date, we have a permanent National Director of Public Prosecution in Advocate Shamla Batoy.
The statutory term of office of the National Director of Public Prosecutions in terms of the National Prosecuting Authority Act, what is that?
It is 10 years.
Has any of the NDPP, National Directors of Public Prosecution, since its inception, ever completed a 10-year term of office?
Unfortunately not, Chair.
Right. Chair, the Constitutional Court in the judgment we referred to earlier has made some pertinent remarks in regard to security of tenure in relation to the independence of the NPA, and that issue will be dealt with in due course. For the moment, Mr. Nxasana, you recall certain events in relation to some of the appointments and dismissals of national directors of public prosecution. That is not necessarily to give a complete record of the evidence, but merely to highlight and raise questions at this point in time, Chair. Would you tell the Chair of the events of which you have at least indirect knowledge from paragraphs 4 onwards?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the issues are of public knowledge. Advocate Bulelan Ngoga, as the first National Director of Public Prosecutions, was subjected to a commission of inquiry after allegations were made against him that he was an apartheid spy. And after he was cleared by the commission that was headed, if my memory serves me well, by Judge Heffer, he then left the NPA. Then Advocate Vus Pikoli was also subjected to the same process of a commission of inquiry. I know at the time he had reinstated charges against the former President Jacob Zuma, and also had instituted criminal proceedings against the then Commissioner of Police and the President of Interpol at the time, Mr. Jackie Slebi, Commissioner Jackie Slebi, I mean. Despite him being cleared at the Ginwala Commission of Inquiry, he was nevertheless removed from office.
I know that the inquiry that was chaired by Dr. Jinwala was an inquiry under the Prosecuting Authority Act, as opposed to a commission of inquiry under the Commissions Act. I'm not sure about the inquiry that was chaired by Justice Heffer in relation to Mr. Muga, whether it was a commission of inquiry under the Commissions Act or whether it was an inquiry under just an inquiry under the National Prosecuting Authority Act. But I think the point you make is not about those technicalities. It's simply that certain inquiries preceded their departure. But it's just important to
make a distinction
when we are not sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing that to my attention.
What is common to both proceedings, however, is that the inquiries, whether judicial or internal to the NPA Act, according to the best of your recollection anyway, in principle at least, cleared both Mr. Nguka and Mr. Pikoli.
That is correct.
And then how was Mr. Pikoli finally removed? Can you recall? Without going into too much detail.
Chair, I remember that despite him having been cleared, but at the time I think it was President Kgalema Motlanthe who was the President of the Republic of South Africa. I think the matter had to be referred to Parliament after the Commission of Inquiry, but I think they took a decision that he should not be retained at NPA.
You've told the Chair in your timeline summary that Advocate Chair was not in the position on any permanent basis.
That is correct, Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius, did he complete the story in relation to Mr. Nguga, his resignation after the inquiry? Did he complete that part? What happened to Mr. Nguga?
In relation to, Chair?
In relation to Mr. Nguga.
Okay,
Did
yes.
he complete the story about what happened after the inquiry chaired by Judge Heffer?
Yes. How did his term of office come to an end, to the best of your recollection? That's after the Judge Heffer inquiry.
My understanding, Chair, is that Mr. Nguga resigned.
And then in relation to Mr. Pikoli, you said to the Chair that the matter came before Parliament, and subsequent to that, or as a consequence of that, his term of office came to an end.
It came to an end. I understand that attempts, he did make attempts to take the matter to court, but I think he was drained out and he couldn't pursue the matter, and ultimately a settlement agreement was reached and he left the NPA.
All right. The details, Chair, are understandably not placed before you in their thoroughness, but will be in time. Then, in relation to Mxolisi Nxasana, what is your recollection?
My recollection, Chair, is that when Advocate Mxolisi Nxasana was appointed as the National Director of Prosecutions, he was the Director General of Justice before that. And at the inquiry, at the Ginwala inquiry, he was called to testify. And the Ginwala inquiry made some critical remarks about his testimony, amongst other things, that his evidence was contradictory. And when he was appointed by the president at the time, as the National Director of Public Prosecutions, I think it was DA, if I'm not mistaken, who then challenged his appointment. And ultimately the matter came before the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court declared the appointment irrational and reviewed it and set aside.
He was then, I understand, replaced in an acting capacity by Advocate Jiba.
That is correct, Chair.
And we will talk of that in a little more detail in due course, I understand. You were then appointed when?
Chair, I was appointed on the 31st of August 2013 with effect from the 1st of October 2013.
Do you recall any litigation before our courts in relation to a directive to the President to make a permanent appointment? Appears to be entirely correct, that no National Director of Public Prosecutions in the whole history of the National Prosecuting Authority has ever fulfilled a full term of office.
That is correct, Chair.
Secondly, the history of incumbents in that office appears to be filled with inquiries and allegations relating to their fitness to hold office, and very often having been cleared of any wrongdoing or any adverse finding, nevertheless their terms of office have come to an end.
That is correct, Chair, especially with regards to Mr. Bulela Nxoga and Advocate Vuspikole.
Yeah. Given your own experience in relation to the National Prosecuting Authority and the post of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, what is your view as to the effect of this history on the stability and effectiveness of the NPA?
Chair, my view is that from this history and also what I experienced at NPA, my view is that there has been political interference as well as external interference that impacted on the decision making in the NPA.
And would that have any effect on public confidence in the NPA?
No doubt it does have effect on public confidence in the NPA.
And what role does Parliament play, to your knowledge, in relation to the National Prosecuting Authority?
Chair, there is a portfolio committee on justice because NPA is also a unit falling under justice, although it is independent. It plays political oversight over the justice as well as NPA.
You will make some comments later in your evidence in relation to the role of Parliament and in relation to matters within your own knowledge. But
Yes.
you'll do that later in the statement.
Yes.
You've also mentioned that Parliament played a role in relation to Mr. Pakoli,
That is correct.
but perhaps we should place that evidence before the Chair in the fullness of time.
Well, the story might not be perceived to be complete when you talk about inquiries in relation to the NPA, if you don't mention that recently there was also an inquiry relating to somebody who had acted as the National Director of Public Prosecutions. So if one states simply facts, of course what you were talking about were those who had been permanently appointed as National Director of Public Prosecutions, namely Mr. Ngoga, Mr. Pikoli, and of course yourself. But there is also somebody who had acted quite a number of times, and I know you will talk more about some of the events. Then there was an inquiry in relation to her, and it's public knowledge that that inquiry reached certain conclusions, and I think the matter may be going to Parliament. For what it's worth, it may be that it's important to just state those facts. Yeah. Okay.
Chair, there will be reference further in the
Yes.
evidence to at least 2 other inquiries.
Yes. No, thank you.
Chair, but your comments are noted. The appointment of a National Director of Public Prosecutions is, you state, governed by the Constitution. You deal with that in paragraph 11 of your statement. Would you just tell the Chair very briefly about the provisions regarding the appointment of a National Director of Public Prosecutions?
Chair,
Sorry, if you would just hold for a moment. May I say, perhaps unsurprisingly, Chair, the live stream is down, and I've been asked to request a 10-minute adjournment.
Okay, all right. We'll take a 10 minutes adjournment to enable the technicians to attend to the problem. We adjourn. may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Nxasana, before the break, you were at paragraph 11 of your statement, and you had, I think, made the point that the appointment of the National Director of Public Prosecutions is governed by the Constitution. Right.
That is correct.
If I may take the liberty, Chair, just to place on record the relevant sections of the Constitution.
Yeah.
You refer, Mr. Nxasana, to section 179 of the Constitution, which provides in subsection 1, there is a single national prosecuting authority in the Republic, structured in terms of an Act of Parliament, and consisting of A National Director of Public Prosecutions, who is the head of the prosecuting authority and is appointed by the President as head of the National Executive, and B, Directors of Public Prosecutions and prosecutors as determined by an Act of Parliament. Who appoints the Directors of Public Prosecutions other than the National Director?
They are also
Directors of Public Prosecutions, are those the NPA officials who are in various provinces, or some are heading the NPA in provinces, but others are not necessarily heading NPA in provinces, but fall within some or other office of the NPA or in the courts? What is the position? What is the structure?
okay. Okay, Chair. The National Director of Public Prosecutions is the head of the prosecution in South Africa, and then we have, during my time, 4, and I think that is what is still in existence. Then have 4 Deputy National Directors of Public Prosecutions. We then have Special Directors of Public Prosecutions. Then we have all of these that I've mentioned are based at the head office in Pretoria of the National Prosecuting Authority. Then in the divisions, in the regions, we have the heads of the prosecutions who are the Director of Public Prosecutions. All of them are appointed also by the President on the recommendation of the Minister of Justice, I think in consultation with the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
So you have talked about Directors of Prosecutions and a head of Directors of Prosecutions, is that right?
Yes, the Directors of Public Prosecutions are head of prosecutions in the regions.
So each Director of Public Prosecution is head of a certain region insofar as NPA is concerned.
Yes.
Okay, and the regions are not necessarily demarcated in accordance with provinces, or are they necessarily demarcated according to provinces?
A decision had been taken to align them to provinces.
Yes.
Because initially that was the whole idea, that the directors of public prosecutions should be aligned to the provinces, that they are heads of public prosecutions in the provinces. But we have exceptions, like in Gauteng. In Gauteng, we have two directors of public prosecution. That's one for the South Gauteng and the one for the North Gauteng. But when I left, at the time when I left, they were in the process of aligning them so that we'll have one director of public prosecutions. Public prosecutions will have one premier for the province. We'll have one president, judge president. We'll have one director of public prosecutions. And in the Eastern Cape as well,
Yes.
because of the
Number of high courts.
the number of high courts and the fact that the area is too wide to cover, we had two directors of public prosecution. Hence, we also had two deputy judge presidents, like in Gauteng. Those are the only exceptions.
But as a general rule, when one hears the term director of public prosecutions, when it is used in the context of the NPA, one should be thinking of somebody in charge of prosecutions in the area falling under a certain high court or in a province, but accepting that there are provinces where there are two directors instead of one.
That is correct, sure.
Where there are two in the same province, that is directors of public prosecutions, one of them would be the head.
No,
Or
they are equal.
there's no head, or they are both
No.
co-heads.
They're both co-heads, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so is the National Director of Public Prosecutions at the top,
Yes,
and then four deputy
national directors.
national directors of prosecutions,
Yes,
and all those are at the head office in Pretoria of the NPA.
that is
And
correct.
then you have special
Special
directors
directors.
of prosecutions, is that right?
Yes.
And those two are, or how many would there be of special directors of prosecutions, public prosecutions?
When I left, because this is not provided for by the...
In the Act.
In the Act. I
Yes.
think they were appointed in terms of a proclamation
Oh.
by the president.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So the number might change from
The
time
number
to
might
time.
change from time to time, because
Okay,
at the time it
okay.
was Advocate Lawrence Mkhwebi for the Specialized Commercial Crime Unit,
Yes.
and at the time it was Mr. Dawood, who was the special director for what's this unit that deals with witnesses,
Sexual
witness
protection of
protection.
witnesses.
Yes, witness protection,
Yeah.
Office of the Witness Protection, and we also had another post for the special director, which I recommended that it be frozen. At the time, Advocate Sean Abraham was acting when I arrived at NPA, and that was the special director for Priority Crime Litigation Unit.
Oh, okay. Now, in terms of the hierarchy, is the National Director of Public Prosecutions, is the Deputy National Directors of Public Prosecutions, and then is it then the special directors below that?
Well,
Or they are on the same level as the directors?
as the directors, they're on the
Oh.
same level, but there is that power play between
Oh.
the special directors and the directors.
About who is at head
And
office, who is not at head
yes.
office? Okay.
I think that power play, it played itself out
Yeah.
in the matter that we'll talk about earlier,
Yes.
later on. Yeah.
Oh, okay, but legally they are on the same
They're
level?
on the same level, yes.
Yes, okay.
It's just that they are directors, they are
Yes.
special directors for
Yes.
them.
Below the directors, do you have deputy directors
We-
of public prosecutions?
We have deputy directors of prosecutions.
Yes, and
And,
those could be a number. There could be a number of
There
them.
could
in
be a
any
number
group.
of them.
Yes.
And some of them are at the head office, they are all over.
Yes.
Well, they also rank themselves, the deputies, as senior and deputies.
Oh, they are different
Yes,
levels.
Yes, they have different levels.
Now, prosecutors that one finds in the high courts and in the magistrate court, would they simply be prosecutors, or some of them would be deputy directors, and maybe even directors?
The prosecutors that normally prosecute in the high courts, they are the advocates who are based in the DPP's office, the Director of Public Prosecutions offices.
Yes.
And anyone, we might find anyone prosecuting,
Yeah.
ranging from an advocate to
Yeah.
senior advocate,
Yeah.
deputy director, senior deputy director.
They fall under the office of
Of the DPP.
particular DPP in the
Yes.
province.
Yes.
Okay, and
Then the prosecutors that you find in the lower courts, well, by lower courts I mean the regional courts going
yes,
down
and the district
to
courts.
to the district courts. Those are prosecutors that fall under the chief prosecutors in
In the particular court.
in the particular courts. The chief prosecutors, they under them, I think they cover a certain area
Of jurisdiction.
of jurisdiction.
Yes, yes.
Under whom they have prosecutors. And
Yes.
below the chief prosecutor would be the senior public prosecutors, control
prosecutors,
prosecutors,
yeah.
then prosecutors
Yes.
in
But
their ranks.
basically, in the province where they operate, the prosecutors, chief prosecutors, and whoever, they fall under the DPP of the province.
All of them. Yes.
All of them.
That is correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And the president appoints the DPPs.
The DPPs, yeah.
But below that, does he go that far?
No, it doesn't go that
He
far.
stops there.
It stops there.
And then who appoints the DPPs? The NTPP? Or who
The
appoints
deputies,
them? The deputy directors.
the deputy directors,
Yeah.
it's the NTPP and the minister,
The minister in consultation with the NTPP.
with the NTPP. yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You refer to Section 1795 of the Constitution. That is the subsection which deals with the powers and duties of the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Perhaps we should place that on record, and then you may make any comment that you wish. Subsection 1795 reads, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, A, must determine, with the concurrence of the Cabinet member responsible for the administration of justice, after At least for now, Chair.
Yes, let's proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Nxasana, if you go to paragraph 14 of your statement, you deal with section 9 of the National Prosecuting Authority Act, which is the legislation which directly governs the National Prosecuting Authority. And you refer to
That is correct.
the section which sets out the requirements of a person who may be appointed as National Director of Public Prosecutions. What are those requirements?
Chair, is that the person must possess legal qualifications that entitle him or her to appear in all courts in the Republic of South Africa. And also that that person must be a fit and proper person with due regard to his or her experience, conscientiousness and integrity, to be entrusted with the responsibilities of the office of the NDPP.
And particularly relevant to your particular case are the provisions, or were the provisions, of section 12 of the Act, which we will deal with when we come to the Constitutional Court matter involving yourself and others,
Okay.
where certain subsections were declared unconstitutional.
Yes.
Let's then deal with section C, which details the circumstances preceding and surrounding your appointment as National Director of Public Prosecutions in 2013. Would you tell the Chair about those circumstances, please?
Yes, Chair. Chair, as I've pointed out that I was conducting my own private practice in Durban. Then during 2013, I cannot remember the exact date and the month, I received a call from Mr. Michael Halley, who was the President's legal advisor, former President Jacob Zuma's legal advisor at the time, who wanted to see me. And I obliged. He came over to see me at my office in Durban. We had a discussion with him. He told me that he was looking for a candidate to fill the position of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, as he was mandated by President Zuma. He had with him 3 names that he told me that he had were given to him by colleagues in Durban. But when he bounced off those names to those colleagues, they were of the view that I was the person who could do the job. And my name was not amongst the list. Hence, he then came to see me. He expressed then he asked me if I was willing to take over I would be willing to take over the appointment.
Before you go there, Mr. Nxasana, in relation to the process by which you had been selected, did you mention anything other, more formal than bouncing your name off other colleagues?
No.
Right.
No,
Sorry,
that-
proceed, if you will.
Then, Chair, I was surprised, I was shocked and surprised, because not in a bad way that I never thought that one day I would become a prosecutor, because I chosen to become an attorney. But it also at the same time humbled me that my colleagues, especially from my division, saw something in me that I could head a institution of that magnitude. Then I felt that I remember that I even remarked to him that if my colleagues have confidence in me, so why not? Why should I not have confidence in myself? Then I was willing, as everyone would be willing to serve the country. I thought that my colleagues saw some qualities in me that entitled me to be appointed to that position. I then agreed.
Did you subsequently meet with the president at the time?
Yes, a meeting was then scheduled to meet the president at his official residence in Pretoria. And I remember, I think it was around August, if I'm not mistaken, if not before that. I went up to meet the president at his official residence in Pretoria. Present at the meeting was the president, Mr. Halley, and I think there was also the lady who I was later told that she was also the legal advisor to the president, Miss Bonisile Machene.
Can you spell that surname, please?
Spelled M-A-K-H-E-N-E, Machene.
Okay, thank you.
Well, based on what Mr. Halley said to you, it seems that what you are saying is he said to you, your peers suggested that you might be the right person,
That is correct, Chair.
and you had not applied for any position.
No, no, Chair. Not.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. What happened at that meeting?
At that meeting, before I went to the meeting, Mr. Halley assured me that I was not going to an interview of any sort. The president wanted just to see me, interact with me, and I should relax. And that's exactly what happened. It was not an interview, it was an interaction. And what I remember quite vividly, what the president asked me of was that, did I have courage to take up that position? To which I responded by saying, yes, I do. And I even said to him that knowing that he has been through hardships, I thought that he meant that I would be able to take decisions independently and firmly. Then I said, yes, I have that courage. And also, I remember he even said something in isiZulu that it's like that position might be like the people stepping you with arrows, something
Well,
like
you
that.
can say it
In
in
isiZulu.
isiZulu and then seek to translate, interpret it for
Okay.
people who might not understand isiZulu.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember well, he said that position is like ifana na nemkhonto esuke ibheke kuwena, which I understood him to be saying that it was a very difficult task to handle, and he described it as like a arrows
position where spears would be
spears
directed
at you. Yes,
Yeah,
spears,
that's
yes.
the Zulu
Literally,
part.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's a position where spears could be directed at you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the meeting that you wish to tell the chair?
Then, Chair, about I was leaving the meeting, I think the meeting lasted for not more than 30 minutes. Because I remember it coincided because I had to wait there. It was a date when I think the former deputy president of the country, Mrs. Mlambo Ngcuka, was there, I think, to meet the president before she was going to take up the position in I think is it in the Hague, if I'm not mistaken. They had a long meeting, then I had to wait. There were also other ministers there that were waiting to see the president. As I was leaving, I think it was Mr. Harley who asked if I had anything to say, and my response was that my father, who's now late, was a trade unionist, and I know that he would mention that the President, Jacob Zuma, was his comrade at the time. I felt that it was necessary to bring that to their attention. I think that was because I think that was prompted by a question that, I think the question was I related to Sizwe Nxasana, if I remember well. Then I said to them, Sizwe is my brother in isiZulu. Well, in English, he's my cousin.
Is he? I know what you are talking about when you say in isiZulu and in English, because in the Zulu culture, you know, if you are of the same surname, you know, there is some kind of connection that is recognized, even though you might not be related in any way in the English sense. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But with him, are you related in any way in the English sense?
No, blood relatives.
You are blood relatives.
Yes, our grandfathers are brothers.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, thank you.
What happened then on the 30th of August 2013? Pursuant to this meeting, did you
Or
have
30th,
further contact with Mr. Halley?
yeah, 30th of August 2013, I remember I was running a trial at Umlazi Court in the civil trial. Then I received a call from Mr. Halley, who then asked me to send him my CV, which I then did.
Did he tell you anything of the President's intentions?
Yes, he told me that the President was under pressure to appoint, and he intended to announce my appointment.
Was your appointment subsequently announced by the President?
Although Mr. Halley had told me that the President was going to announce the appointment probably over the weekend or on a Monday, I think he told me that circumstances forced him, because the information leaked from the President's office, which then precipitated the President to make the announcement the next day, which was the 31st of August, 2013.
Do you know whether the position prior to your appointment of National Director of Public Prosecutions was advertised in any way?
No, I do not know. I had not seen any advertisement myself.
And apart from what you have told the chair, are you aware of any more formal, or any other, for that matter, selection process?
No, Chair, I have no idea if there were other selection process or whether there were other candidates interviewed. But Chair, I think I must pause to mention that later on I discovered that Advocate Chiba, as she was acting, she was promised by the then Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Minister Jeff Hadebe, that she was going to be appointed on a permanent basis.
Yes, we deal with that later. For the moment, though, were you ever subjected to an interview in the formal sense, where you were asked questions about your own history, your own qualifications, your professional history,
except for the
your
meeting,
aptitude?
except for the meeting that we had when I met President Zuma, Mr. Halley, and Miss Bonsile Mahene, nothing.
So there was no interview that one could describe as a formal job application interview in relation to your appointment?
Unless they were to ascribe that meeting as the formal interview.
Well,
None.
did it have the characteristics, to your knowledge, of what one would expect in the ordinary sense a job interview to entail?
What I can say, Chair, is that recently there has been an interview to appoint the National Director of Prosecutions. If that's what you mean, that was not done. That process was not done.
Were you required to fill in any application form, setting out your personal history, your details, and similar matters?
No, Chair.
You did, however, complete a security clearance application.
Yes, I did. I completed it only after I was appointed and I was in the office. I think it was around December in 2013.
Did you sign any other document apart from your security clearance application prior to being employed?
I would have signed my employment contract as well as the oath of office before Judge President Mlambo.
You did, of course, as you said, you were asked to finish your CV, which you did.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You then would have arrived at the NPA during October, is that correct? Of
That-
2013.
That is correct. Excuse me. That is correct, Chair.
What did you find on your arrival?
Chair, I received a welcome from the personnel at NPA. At one stage, the Minister of Justice, Mr. Khadebe, also came to the head office to introduce me. And I can say I was warmly received.
Prior to your assumption of duty, but after the announcement of the appointment, had you been in touch with the acting National Director of Public Prosecutions, who was acting before you came, to arrange for what would happen when you arrived, or there was no communication?
Chair, there was no communication. I didn't know anyone at the head office, except that when I arrived there, I identified the person that I knew in the leadership as Advocate Pinky Mokhatla, because she attended, I think, the university in KZN in Durban, and she qualified there and she practiced there as an advocate. And she was also my colleague in the Black Lawyers Association. That's where I knew her from. But to answer the question, there was a time when the CEO at the time, Advocate Karen van Rensbeck, and the Deputy CEO, that was Ms. Beryl Sisulu, they phoned me and they wanted to come and meet with me just to give me a briefing of what I should expect when I get to the NPA. They came down to Durban and we met, I remember, in one of the hotels in Umhlanga. Then, as we were in the meeting, I then subsequently received a call from a person who introduced herself as Advocate Jiba, who was acting, who wanted to see me as well, and she then appeared to be around Durban. I had to hastily go and meet her. I didn't know whether it was a coincidence that she knew that they had come down, the CEO and the Deputy CEO, but I later learned that they got a hiding because they came down to see me from Advocate Jiba. We met. When I met Advocate Jiba, she was in the presence of the Director of Prosecutions in KZN, Advocate Moipon Noko, and the gentleman that I knew very well from KZN in Durban, who at the time was Colonel, is it BW Mhlongo, Colonel Mhlongo, at the time. We exchanged pleasantries with him because he's a Mhlongo and my late mama's surname is Mhlongo, and we used to call each other cousins until his involvement in all of this thing, and which I didn't know then. We stopped having that relationship.
Well, you deal with some of those issues in due course.
Yes.
Perhaps we should take it step by step. The acting National Director of Public Prosecutions at the time of your appointment was Advocate Chiba.
That is correct.
Was there any formal or even informal handing over process where the two of you sat down and exchanged details of the state of the NPA, the prosecution's current policies and the like?
No, Chair.
Did you instruct Advocate Chiba to conduct a formal handover process on your appointment?
I did, Chair, and she didn't comply.
In relation to the date of your assumption of duty, when would that have been? In a week's time, when you asked for the head to do a handover? Week's time, 2 weeks' time, or much later?
Chair, there were a lot of things happening, Chair. Because when I would think it was around December, if I'm not mistaken, December of 2013.
Okay, thank you.
At the time, we know from other evidence, and the Chair will be informed perhaps in relation to these matters in more detail in due course, but we've heard that at this time there were investigations being conducted in regard to the conduct of General Boyson in KwaZulu-Natal, what has been called the Cato Manor Death Squad investigations.
Yes, Chair.
Were you given any information about those investigations on your assumption of office?
No, Chair, I wasn't given any information.
How did you learn of the investigations, if at all?
Apart from the fact that coming from Durban, I knew that there was an investigation whilst I was still in private practice, because the matter was at the court that I appear frequently. That's the Durban court. But when I assumed office, I didn't know what was the status of that matter, and I wasn't informed about it. I only learned about it when I read the newspaper. I cannot remember where I was coming from, but I was traveling. I was on the plane, reading, if I remember, the Business Times. Then I saw that there was a decision by Judge Goven in KZN.
G-O-R-V-E-N.
G-O-R-V-E-N, yes. Criticizing the manner in which Advocate Chiba handled herself in the matter. But of particular concern was also that the NPA was appealing the decision of Judge Goven. Then I became worried because, as the head of the institution and taking into consideration the seriousness of that matter, I thought that it was appropriate that I be familiarized with what was happening. I immediately summoned I think it was Advocate Chiba, and asked her to tell me what was happening in the matter, and summoned the prosecuting team. they came over to my office in Pretoria, and we went through the evidence there, and then I got the briefing. Chair, I think they have spoken about the matter previously, but
Yes.
of particular importance is that what I also found in the matter is that when Advocate Jiba authorized the racketeering certificate, but perhaps I must explain that the racketeering certificate can only be authorized by one person in the whole country. That is the National Director of Prosecutions himself or herself. And the National Director of Prosecutions cannot delegate that authority to anyone.
That is in terms of the National Prosecuting Authority Act, or in terms of the legislation.
In terms of the
relating
legislation.
to
Yes.
racketeering.
Yes, in terms of the
okay.
legislation to racketeering. Then in this matter, what I found is that Advocate Jiba authorized the racketeering. She signed the racketeering certificate and authorized that General Poison be charged with racketeering, which was then the subject matter in court. General Poison challenged that, and Judge Govan found in his favor that there was no evidence justifying the authorization of the racketeering charges against General Poison. But when I questioned Advocate Jiba why she had to sign that, obviously bearing in mind that she was accessing her authority at the time before I came there, her response was that she relied, if I quote her, she said, I relied on these so-called experts, racketeering experts. And then I pointed out to her that
Was she pointing to certain specific people as experts?
Yes, she pointed at people, the prosecution team who were present.
Yes, okay.
Then I said to her, perhaps it would have been better. I wouldn't have expected her to go through the bundles and bundles. In fact, it was the boxes of evidence. But if I were her, I said I would have asked them to point me to the relevant evidence that points to racketeering, or to the relevant evidence that implicates General Poison. And to my surprise, what they then produced.
I'm sorry. When you say she said she relied on the persons that she referred to as experts in racketeering,
Yes.
was she saying that in relation to concluding whether or not a racketeering charge should be one of the charges against General Poison?
That is correct.
So she was saying as to whether there was enough evidence or not to justify a charge of racketeering, she had relied on them.
That is correct.
That was your understanding?
That
of
was
the
my
evidence.
understanding,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Yes. Then, Chair, I think it's on record that what was there in the file, in the docket, was a mere unsigned statement, not commissioned from one witness who left the country, as in Greece, is in Greece. And also the other statements were statements of, were hearsay statements which were not only hearsay but twice remote hearsay statements. And Worship, my feeling was that there is no way. I then took them through and I explained to them, I convinced them that there is no way that we would succeed in appealing the decision of Judge Govan. And I then instructed them to withdraw the notice of appeal, which they then did.
You made a comment earlier on about who has power to authorize or sign a racketeering certificate or authorize that a person be charged with racketeering. And as I understand your evidence, you were saying that it's only the National Director of Public Prosecutions in the whole country who can authorize that a person be charged with racketeering. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
And to show that authorization, he or she signs a certain certificate. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Now, I thought there was a point you wanted to make about that. I assume that Ms. Jiba had signed that certificate, if she did sign it, at a time when she was acting National Director of Public Prosecutions?
That is correct, and because she was acting National Director, she had the power.
She had the power.
She had the power
so there's
to
no
sign.
issue about that.
The issue is that, Chair, the point I'm making is, before she signed the racketeering certificate, she had to satisfy herself that there was evidence just to justify her to sign the racketeering certificate. And I found her response to my question really puzzling, that she could only rely upon what she was told by the so-called experts, the prosecutors were leading the matter. Because I think that was the reason why the legislature made that provision that it must only be the National Director of Public Prosecutions. That is, the National Director of Public Prosecutions is given the responsibility to satisfy himself or herself that because of the consequences flowing from being charged with racketeering. Yes.
So part of the point you are making is there must be a reason why the legislation said only one person in the whole country can make the decision whether a person should be charged with racketeering.
That is correct.
And that must be because of the seriousness of the charge of racketeering and its consequences on a person.
Yes.
And that although any prosecutor and any director of public prosecutions should satisfy themselves or himself or herself before deciding on any charge against anybody, this one is particularly serious.
It's very serious.
And,
Yes.
and the NTPP must take care to satisfy himself that there is, or herself that there is proper and sufficient evidence before authorizing it. That's part of the point you are making.
That's the point I'm making.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned to the chair, Mr. Nxasana, that during the course of the conversation with Advocate Jiba, you suggested that she might have considered actually examining the evidence and asking the prosecutors to point out the evidence to her on which she based her decision.
That is correct, Chair.
What do you recall her response to that intervention by yourself?
Chair, her response was that she relied on even if I quote her verbatim, she said, I relied on these so-called racketeering experts.
I understand you to say the persons to whom she referred as experts were in the same room.
That is
in the
correct.
meeting. What was their response when she said that? Did they say anything about whether there was evidence or were they conceding that there wasn't evidence?
Chair, the team, as far as I can recall, the team appeared to be divided on the issue, but they were of the opinion, I don't know, because they were quiet. They did not respond to when she said she relied on what they had told her.
Yes.
But then we went through the matter, and I made it clear, it became very clear that there was no evidence before in the docket to justify the racketeering. In fact, Chair, I went as far as to, if I may be allowed this latitude, I went as far as to advise them that, you see, I come from Durban, and most of the, and some of the victims of the so-called Cato Manor death squad were people that I knew personally. I even told them at that meeting. And I told them that perhaps I was trying to dispel any feeling that I might be taking sides. I wanted to display to them that if there was any person that is really very close to what is happening in KZN, it's myself other than them. Because even the people who died under the so-called, the alleged death squad are the people that I knew. And I counted to them the names of those people that I knew very well. I was trying to convince them, and I said to them, you see, I understand that you mustn't be carried away by these racketeering charges. You may also consider the predicate charges, predicate offenses, murder, accessory to murder, conspiracy to murder, if there is any. But really, in the docket, there is none. There is no evidence of racketeering against General Poison. And if the docket still remains the same as I left it, my view is still the same.
Thank you.
Right. So, in summary, you learnt from sources other than sources in the NPA that Judge Gorvin had issued a judgment in which he was critical of the NPA stance in relation to charges against General Boyson.
I read from the newspaper.
You read from the newspaper.
Yes.
You then instituted your own inquiries within the office as Director of National Public Prosecutions.
That is correct,
You
Chair.
called Advocate Jiba, who had signed the racketeering certificate, to account, basically.
That is correct, Chair.
You suggested to her that it would have been appropriate for her to satisfy herself directly by reference to witness statements and other evidence that there was indeed a basis for issuing the certificate.
That is correct, Chair.
You then understood from her responses that she hadn't had direct access or required direct access to evidence, but had rather relied on the opinions of others.
That is absolutely correct, Chair.
You then conducted the exercise yourself,
That is correct,
and
sir.
you came to a different conclusion.
That is so, sir.
You see, some of the witnesses who have come before me have suggested that what has happened in some of the cases is that people who were fighting corruption were being charged by the NPA with various crimes in circumstances where there was no evidence to support those crimes. The suggestion being that the decisions to charge certain people may have been influenced by reasons other than legitimate legal reasons. Now, I have to ask you this question. Did the persons that Ms. Jiba referred to as experts in racketeering, did they at any stage say to you, here are certain documents which supported our opinion that General Poison should be charged? Either on that day, that meeting, or at any stage afterwards, did they ever say to you, no, our decision or recommendation to the acting NDPP was justified because of this and that and that and that?
Chair, I did ask them to produce at least evidence, at least prima facie evidence against general poison. But they then referred to the statement of, I don't know if I may mention the witness by name.
I think you may. I think we may have been told. I think we may have been told. Yes.
Then they then produced the statement of a Mr. Danikas. Danikus was a Greek national. It was an unsigned statement.
Won't you spell that name, please?
It's Danikus, Danikus. Yeah. Chair, that was an unsigned statement. Then when I asked for any other statement implicating General Poison, they then produced a statement. I cannot remember the name, but I'll try to recollect. It was a person who apparently was a security guard for a Stenger Taxi Association, who in his statement was alleging that a Mr. Mhlongo, who was a member of the executive committee of Stenger's Taxi Association, had collected monies from the association and told the association in this security guards present that that money was required by the general, and that he was present when Mhlongo and the chairperson at the time was Mr. Zondi of the Stenger Taxi Association, went to meet with the general at the gateway. Chair, that is the general. It doesn't even describe that it was General Poison. That is the problem. And but he doesn't say that he overheard the conversation between even that general and Mhlongo. That was the only evidence that they said that it implicated General Poison.
So this person who had signed this statement, you say he was a security guard, simply said he was present when somebody collected money and said it was for a certain general, or the general
Wanted the money. Yes.
wanted by the general.
Yes.
He did not mention who the general was. Is that
No.
Yes, and that he was present also, or that the chairperson of the Taxi Association took it to
meet with the general.
Yes. And that he was present when he met with the general, or that didn't come out clearly.
It didn't come out clear, but I think he was in the vehicle as the VIP.
Yes.
As the
Yes,
VIP protection.
but also he didn't say who the general was.
Yes.
Or those the only two documents they produced,
At the time, yes.
and they did that in that meeting,
In that meeting,
in Ms. Jiba's presence.
in Ms. Jiba's presence.
And Ms. Jiba didn't point to anything else she might have been told or shown in regard to what evidence there was.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps, Chair, that is why, if I follow the matter, I think when it came before you, if I'm not mistaken, I think that is why then subsequently I heard that Advocate Sean Abrams reinstated the charges, but I understand that people were sent to Greece to obtain a statement. Again, I'm told that that statement is written in Greece and it was translated by someone here.
No, I think it's important that while you are here, we get as much
Yes.
evidence as you have to inquire into these things, these matters, because it's quite a serious suggestion or allegation when it is said that the NPA or certain people within the NPA abused their powers to charge people against whom there was no evidence, and that they were motivated by certain illegitimate considerations. Because if there is no evidence to support those allegations against those people or against the NPA, then let us know. But if there is evidence, then let us know. The nation deserves to know exactly what the position is, because the NPA is a very important institution in the country and in the fight against crime. And the nation needs to know exactly what the position is. And if there are people who did that, we must know if there's evidence that shows that that's what they did. And they will come before the commission, put their side of the story, and the commission will make decisions and findings in due course. And it was important that somebody like you comes before the commission, because you were, for a certain period of time, occupying this very important position of NDPP, and you left under certain circumstances, and in the public domain, there are all kinds of things that are said, but also there are judgments, court judgments that have dealt with that. It's important that somebody like you comes and tells the commission exactly what you know and what happened while you were NDPP, so that the commission can have as full a picture as possible before, in due course, it makes findings.
Yes, I appreciate it. Chair, can I make also this observation, because so that my evidence here is not taken out of context?
Yes.
I haven't suggested that there was no evidence at all against General Boysen's co-accused.
Yes, yes.
That just to make that one very clear.
Yes.
Because
but you are saying, with regard to
the
General
racketeering
Boysen,
charge against Boysen,
yes,
Chair, there was
yes.
not a shred of evidence.
Are you saying anything in regard to any other charges? I can't remember whether that was the only charge he was facing. Are you saying anything about any other charges he may have been facing other than the racketeering charge?
Chair,
I just can't remember if it was just the racketeering charge.
Because in the main, Chair, perhaps just to unpack this matter, Chair, I even suggested, Chair, that if I were prosecuting that matter or directing that matter, I said to them, you could have approached one of the co-accused and turn him a 204 witness, because most of the evidence, I said to them, I'm based in Durban and come from Durban, and all that you are telling me here is what is in the public domain in Durban. We hear a lot of things about Ketomena at the time, and I told them that we would hear that when the members of the Ketomena unit had killed a person, they would plant a firearm, and then General Boysen would come and take over the scene, so to say. Those were the allegations. But then I said to them, these are just allegations, and without the evidence in the docket, we cannot prosecute, because we don't prosecute with emotions. And I tell you, this is what I would also hear about the Ketomena unit. And Chair, there was also evidence also in the way allegations, not evidence, in the docket, that one member of the Ketomena unit shot and killed a teenager at, I think, Impangeno Iskawin, when they were looking for a suspect. I don't know whether the suspect was related to this young man, but I think they recklessly opened fire and killed an innocent young man. That's a simple investigation. I've never been an investigator in my life, but I mean, you can collect evidence, match cartridges, spent cartridges, take the firearms for ballistic examination purposes and link the person, or even use the doctrine of common purpose to charge whoever. That is why I pointed out to them that they mustn't get carried away by this racketeering charge. But of particular importance, which I brought to their attention, that because if you want to charge a person with racketeering, you have to prove that there has been a pattern. And this pattern has been continuously happening for a particular period. And I said, if they want to allege that Katomena as the unit, which was based in Katomena, Chair knows where Katomena is, in Durban. And my difficulty was that at the time, General Boysen was not even a member of that unit, because he was the head of the Hawks in Durban, based at the now called Servamos building in Durban. And then to allege that he was managing the enterprise when he was based there, there was a disjoint. They were not going to succeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to explain the reference you made to Section 204. Section 204 is a section of the Criminal Procedure Act, I understand, that is used to enable a co-accused to assist the prosecution and perhaps receive indemnity in the court's discretion as a result.
That is correct, Chair.
And that's what you were referring to.
That is what I was referring
earlier
to.
as having been a step that could and perhaps should have been taken.
That is correct, Chair. That is what I was suggesting.
The time at which you took office, October 2013, was a time when the former President Zuma was still being investigated, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Were you briefed on the status of that investigation?
Not at all, Chair. In fact, Chair, I've never even touched the docket relating to the former President Jacob Zuma. I understand that the docket was still in the possession of Advocate Jiba and Mr. Hofmeyer, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it correct that the investigation was still going on at the time? Because remember, in 2009, charges were withdrawn. Did the investigation continue after they had been withdrawn?
Chair, my response to the question of the investigation, I understand quite clearly that the investigations had ceased by then, but I understand that the matter was pretty much very alive because there were challenges at the time. Then my response is in regard to that there were people who were still challenging the decision to withdraw charges against the former President Jacob Zuma.
Okay, so in other words, you are not necessarily saying there were investigators who were still continuing to investigate.
No.
That you don't know.
No, I'm not saying I don't know.
Yeah,
Yes.
you simply know that the matter.
There were court challenges.
There were
yes.
court challenges relating to the dropping of the charges.
That is correct.
Okay.
Chair. Yes.
Perhaps my question should have been rephrased to more accurately reflect what you say in paragraph 29, Mr. Nxasana, where you say you were not briefed on the status of the investigation rather than on whether the investigation itself was continuing.
That is correct.
All right, if we can move on then please to the events leading up to your own suspension. During your first year in office, there was not much more than the first year in office, but during that year, did you learn anything about the attitude towards you and the conduct towards you on the part of advocates Jiba and Mxwebe? That's Lawrence Mxwebe and Nongqobo Jiba.
Yes, Chair. Chair, as I pointed out that I was appointed on the 31st of August 2013 with effect from the 1st of October 2013. In a sense, it means that I had this whole month of September still in Durban to wrap up before I took office. Chair, I started to learn that during that period of September, because the announcement was made by the President, that there were people that were running around, driving around in the township where I grew up from, that is Umlazi, in my area, and that these people, male people, were stopping people, asking them about me, about my history, especially about my involvement in a matter that was publicized of murder around 1985. It didn't puzzle me at first, because I thought that it was part of the vetting process. But this thing gained its momentum until I got to the office. I then learned that there were members within NPA who were very much responsible also for that. I then subsequently received unsolicited statement in the form of an affidavit from one member of the NPA by the name of Terence Chube, who was at the time, I don't know if he still is, a risk specialist at NPA, was based in Durban. He sent me an email, and in the email there was an affidavit. That affidavit forms part of the bundle here, where he was basically telling me that there was a campaign by Advocate Jiba that to dig the dirt about me, so that the intention, the whole purpose was to embarrass me, so that the president will then remove me as the National Director of Public Prosecutions, and she would then stand a chance of being considered to either continue to act or to be appointed permanently. It is there. But it also, in this affidavit, he also states that there were two police members that were assigned to the DPP, that's the the Director of Public Prosecutions in KZN, Advocate Noko, who was stationed there at his office, who had received vehicles from the provincial office. At the time, the commissioner was Commissioner Mamonye Ngobeni, and that those people that were there, those two gentlemen, they were then tasked with going around finding any dirt about me. But he also went as far as recording this Colonel Mhlongo. Yesterday, I tried to get this recording. I only managed to get it very late because it happened in 2013 or 2014, where basically I could hear the voice of Colonel Mhlongo and Terence Chube. Chube was playing along. Colonel Mhlongo didn't know that was recording him. He was basically saying that Jiba had mandated him to go about digging dirt about me. They went so far as to, in that recording, saying that I think Terence Chube had undertaken to hook him up with people from the Road Accident Fund, because the allegation was that because I was practicing as an attorney, they were alleging that I had embezzled clients' monies when I handled the Road Accident Fund claims. And also, I don't know how they got it from, and it's true that my wife at some stage was employed at the Road Accident Fund office in Durban. All of that is there, that my wife was also employed there, and that Terence Chube was going to hook him up with the gentleman at road accident fund so that they could give them evidence implicating me in all of that. They also refer in the murder charge that Terence Joubert could hear him saying that that murder charge that you have in your possession, they're referring to Colonel Mhlongo. That was, it's there, it's there. I have it in the recording.
Because these are serious allegations, perhaps we should do you the favor of allowing to go through your evidence in the sequence you've settled it in your statement. You talked about people in Mxolisi informing you. This was before your appointment actually became confirmed.
It was confirmed.
Before you took office.
Yes, yes.
After its confirmation, but before you took office. Trying to, as you put it, dig up information about your past.
That is correct.
That's the one set of facts that you placed before the chair.
That is correct.
You also mentioned earlier in your evidence the approach to you of two NPA officials.
Yes, Chair.
Now, what did they tell you? That's in paragraph 33 of your statement.
That is the one that I'm referring to. That approach, I meant the affidavit that I received from Mr. Terence Joubert.
And the other person?
The other person was Miss Queen Mhlongo, who was stationed at the NPA offices attached to the asset forfeiture unit.
What did she tell you?
She told me that Colonel Mhlongo was bragging, saying that in fact she also had recorded him. Unfortunately, we have lost the phones now and the recordings, but I listened to the recording myself. And in that recording, he was bragging that he claimed to know me very well, and he made a lot of false allegations about me in that recording. But of importance is that he was saying that he had been promised the appointment of the brigadier. He was accusing me of wanting to charge General Mxolisi, and that General Mxolisi, if he's not charged, General Mxolisi was going to make sure that he is appointed as the, he was going to be promoted as the brigadier.
Let's just take that slowly, because that's a lot of information.
Maybe before you proceed, Mr. Pretorius, just one line. At the time, going back to Mr. Joubert's affidavit, at the time you got that affidavit, was Mr. Joubert known to you?
Chair, no, it wasn't known to me.
So you received an affidavit from somebody that you had never met, that you didn't know?
Yes, but he's an employee of the NPA,
Yes.
and my details are
Yes.
there for them. Because
Okay.
I received on the official NPA email.
Okay, thank you.
So you've said in your statement that almost immediately after you were appointed, two NPA officials approached you. We'll deal with Mr. Joubert in a moment. The other person, how do you spell her name?
It's Queen Mhlongo. Mhlongo, it's Mhlongo.
Oh. Did she tell you anything about Advocates Jiba and Mkhwebi?
Chair, except that, just if I can refresh my memory.
Yes, please do. Look at paragraph 33 of your statement.
Yes, Chair. That's the evidence that I've just given. That paragraph 33 talks to that, about the plot to oust me. That Colonel Mhlongo was the main person that was used by Advocate Jiba to run the campaign.
And Advocate Mxolisi?
Both of them, Chair.
You talk about two officials of the NPA. One of them, I understand to have been Mr. Yube that you
Yes.
talked about. Was the other one the person that you refer to as Queen Mhlongo?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay.
She was attached to the asset forfeiture unit based in Durban at the time, but she's no longer with the NPA. She's in
Okay.
the private
Okay, thank you.
sector now.
Did they approach you together as a team, or did they approach you
No,
separately?
independent of each other, Chair.
These were two separate
Separate
independent
incidents.
approaches to you?
Yes.
Around about the same time,
Around about the same time, Chair. Yes.
during the month of September, before you, after you had commenced your duties as NTPP.
Yes, after I had commenced my duties, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And Chair, I think I must also mention that both, I think they were, Terence Joubert, and although he was a risk office specialist, I think his office was also in the same building as the office where of the asset forfeiture unit of the NPA in Durban. That is the
Where Miss Queen Mhlongo
Yes,
was
it's-
working as
yes,
well.
is it 185 building, Southern Life building? Yes.
These approaches to you, at whose instance were they made? Did you call on them to speak to you? Did they come of their own accord? What was the case?
No, Chair, they came of their own accord
And separately?
and separately. In fact, Chair, what I have not mentioned here in the affidavit is I've referred earlier to an incident when I said I was warmly welcomed at the NPA, and during that, I referred to the day when Minister Khadebe came to introduce me. I gave a speech also there. We were at the auditorium. Chair, I then said, I remember saying that, Minister, no NDPP has ever finished his term of office. And I can assure you that I will finish my term of office. In fact, the NPA Act even permits me to take an extra period of not more than 2 years, and I'm sure that I will be here for the period of 12 years. I was saying that in jest. But
Yes.
what then happened is that later on, a lady was then seconded to my office as my secretary. And at a very late stage, she then said to me that she related a story to me. That she said she was present at when I gave that at that welcoming event. Then he said there was a gentleman. She was standing by the door, and a certain gentleman immediately passed a comment after I made those remarks and said, "You'll be surprised that we won't even last for a period of 3 months." As we continued working together then in the office, and she then happened to meet and know that apparently that person who made those comments was Mr. Lawrence Mxolisi.
So this lady who was employed by the NPA said a person was standing behind her
Yeah. Or next to her.
or next to her
Yes.
at the time when you made the speech
Yes.
after being introduced by Minister Jeff Khadebe at the NPA to the NPA staff,
Yeah.
said you will be surprised that you won't even finish 3 months.
That is correct, Chair.
And then that same lady later came back to you and said that person was Mr. Lawrence Mxolisi.
Yes, when she got to see him, when we had interactions with them in my
Yes.
boardroom. Yes.
Yes, okay,
And she identified him as Lawrence Mxolisi.
okay, thank you.
You've spoken then about the two NPA officials who approached you unsolicited and separately
Yes,
with information
yes,
about what other people in the NPA were doing to unseat you.
yes.
Is that more or less an accurate summary? I don't want to put words in your mouth unnecessarily. We're going to go to the detail in a moment.
Yeah, but again, also, Chair, perhaps this might also become relevant. Also, just to go back, during that September period of 2013, when the announcement had been made, before I took office, I remember I received a call from Advocate Mxolisi, commonly known as Advocate Mxolisi Nxasana. Commonly known as Sticks Mxolisi. I know that he was then subsequently one of the members of the Kasim Commission of Inquiry. He was also. He phoned me in the morning and said to me, apparently he made mention of a Mr. Mkhwebi. He said he understand Mr. Mkhwebi wanted to speak to me because he fears, or he has told him that he has been told that when I came to NPA, I will deal with him. Which it took me by surprise, as I pointed out earlier on, that I did not even know him. I had not even met him. I didn't know anyone except the person that I later identified as Advocate Pinky Mokhatla.
The information that the lady gave you about the gentleman that was standing next to her, was that information solicited?
No, Chair.
Okay.
You said that Mr. Terence Joubert gave you an affidavit. That's part of the bundle.
That is correct, Chair.
In summary, what did Mr. Joubert tell you in that affidavit, or what did that affidavit say? You deal with that in paragraph 36.
In summary, Chair, apparently Advocate Jiba was going to Durban. I think it was on the day that I met her. And the protocol is that Terence Joubert, as the risk specialist in Durban, was responsible for security and risk. I think he was the head in Durban. He was the one who was going to fetch Advocate Jiba from the King Shaka International Airport and drive her to her destination. But then Mr. Joubert says that he then subsequently, when he had made arrangements to go and fetch Advocate Jiba, he received a phone call from the Advocate Jiba's secretary advising him that he was no longer going to be, it was not going to be him who was going to fetch Advocate Jiba, and it was now going to be Colonel Mhlongo. And then he said he found that very strange because he talks about the security, the protocol, and the security risk attached to all of that. And then he made mention of a situation where he then made mention of these two police officers that were deployed to the DPP's office in Durban, Advocate Nogo, and that when he challenged that because of the security risk and that they were not vetted, apparently his boss from the head office, Mr. Ramahana, flew down and came down and castigated him for that. Then he, in this affidavit, he then talks about the plot now, that apparently Jiba was running a campaign to get me removed. He said to Mhlongo, or he said Mhlongo told him that...
Mhlongo told who?
Oh, sorry, Mhlongo told Joubert.
Yes.
That Jiba said to him, Jiba doesn't trust this guy. who is the new NDPP, Mr. Nxasana, and that Mhlongo must go out and get some and dig some dirt about him, so
That's
that
you.
about me.
Yes.
The whole intention was to embarrass me, and that she didn't know me, but the whole intention was to embarrass me, so that the president will remove me or will fire me as the national director, and she will then be considered to either continue to act or to be considered to be appointed on a permanent basis.
So the affidavit of Mr. Joubert talks of a conversation between Colonel Mxolisi and Mr. Joubert.
Yes, that is
Relates
correct.
what was told to Mr. Joubert in that conversation by Colonel Mxolisi.
That is correct.
And you've related some of that. Was anything mentioned in that conversation, according to Mr. Joubert, about the road accident fund?
That is correct, Chair.
And is that what you've just told the chair?
That is what I've just told the Chair, and also the issue about the cases that I had faced in about 2015, sorry, in
And
1985.
Was anything said about the prior example of Mr. Stanley Gumede? Would you explain that briefly
yes,
to the
Chair.
chair?
Chair, yes. In that affidavit also, Mr. Joubert refers to, he says that Colonel Mhlongo also told him that Mr. Stanley Gumede, who's the regional magistrate in Durban, was the person who was considered for the position before myself. But that Advocate Jiba ran the campaign to discredit him. And one of the things in that affidavit that Joubert alleges is that Jiba then they convinced one advocate, they call him a Kosi, in Durban to complain about the manner in which Mr. Gumede had treated her in court. As a result, Mr. Gumede had to face a lot of complaints, and he was investigated by the Magistrates Commission. The matter was all over the media, and the president, that precipitated the president not considering him as the candidate. Then he says that they were using the very same tactic that they used against, and he was responsible, Mr. Colonel Mhlongo, in that campaign authorized by Jiba.
Now, you've told the chair that this conversation between Mr. Joubert and Colonel Mxolisi was recorded.
That is correct, Chair.
You informed the investigators that it had been recorded, but as of yesterday, we had not been, or the investigators had not been able to obtain the recording.
That is correct, Chair.
You managed to obtain the recording
Yesterday after I had left you.
Okay. And you now have that recording.
That is correct, Chair.
Chair, we haven't had an opportunity, firstly, to hear the recording, secondly, and importantly, to transcribe the recording. I'm not averse to playing the recording should you require, Chair. In fact, happy to do so, but on the assumption that we haven't been able to recognize the witness in relation to the recording.
How long is the conversation in the recording?
Chair, I think it's less than 8 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Or
Yes.
5 minutes, yeah.
Maybe during lunch break, I don't know if there could be a chance for you to hear it. I would not be insisting that it be heard today if you'd rather let it be heard some other time, but
Well, it's just perhaps inconvenient for you, Chair, to hear the recording, which may be unclear in part without it being properly transcribed. But without a transcription,
if you...
it's not up to us to recognize the witness in
Yeah.
the sense that we...
No, I would prefer that you hear it first so that you have an idea about its value.
Indeed, Chair, we'll do that over the
before I
long
allow
adjournment.
it. If once you have heard it, and if you say you take your submissions that it can be heard, then we can look at hearing it. But if there are circumstances that justify that it be heard on another day, that should be arranged. I'm sure Mr. Nxasana would make himself available. But obviously, to the extent that is possible, we would like to try and finish his evidence.
Today.
So it's just a balance to be struck.
Indeed, Chair.
Thank you.
Is this a convenient time then?
Yes. We'll take the lunch adjournment now. It's 1 o'clock. We will resume at 2. We adjourn.